Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping back in to some IPAs. It's been a while and I'm looking forward to doing it. Both beers, as has been the trend for quite some time, I did procure from Tavour. We're going to be doing two that are going to be kind of a interesting comparison because they're both the identical ABV and they're both standard IPAs, nothing funky, nothing weird. But three different hops in the same ABV. So we're going to be starting with a collaborative brew between Brewer Brewing Company and City Brewing. This beer, honestly, the name is just positively inane. It's so stupid. I hate to hear me say it, but nonetheless, they called this beer that Ish Cray. I'm not kidding. That's what they named it. Colossally stupid name for a beer. That aside, I'm reserving judgment because they can name it whatever they want so long as they made a good beer. And I've had very good luck with Brewer Brewing Company's beers, so I'm looking forward to jumping into this one. As I stated, both beers are 7.2% ABV. Brewer is based in Oceanside, New York, and the hop bill on this one is Citra, Columbus, and Mosaic. For beer number two, we've got Ex Novo Brewing Company's Eliot Brewers Edition. Again, standard IPA, 7.2% ABV. They're based in Portland, Oregon, and this one's been brewed with Citra, Eldorado, and Galaxy. So two just standard IPAs, both the same ABV, and they share a common hop variety, and both of them have 3 in their hop bill. So this ought to be a pretty interesting kind of comparison, and I'm looking forward to jumping in. It's been a while since I've done an IPA review, so we're going to get started with Brewer Brewing Company's collaborative brew with City Brewing, that Ish Cray, that clocks in at 7.2% ABV. Okay, so jumping into the first beer of today's IPA review, we have got Brewer Brewing Company's collaborative brew they did with City Brewing, that Ish Cray. Standard IPA, 7.2% ABV. Brewer is based in Oceanside, New York, and they did use a blend of Citra, Columbus, and Mosaic hops. So, not to beat the dead horse here, but yes, the name is just unbelievably stupid. I can't believe somebody actually named their beer that, but that's fine. Maybe it's an inside joke. It is what it is. So forget the name. Let's take a peek at the label art. As you can see, it's very colorful. It is bright pink. I mean, positively bright pink. It's got all sorts of interesting, I don't know, it looks like a tiger holding up a fist with a medallion around its neck and another one shooting lasers out of its eyes. I don't even know. It's kind of a crazy can. But pretty neat art, and it's very bright pink, so if you like pink, there you go. Nonetheless, let's get this one cracked. We're using our all-purpose Sam Adams glassware today, which does a really good job with IPAs. It does well for most styles, but IPAs particularly well. So let's get this poured right in the glass. Okay, as I'm pouring this, it's a very light pale, very straw pale color. Looks very, very nice. It's forming a nice creamy head. I'm going to have to back off and give that some room to bloom. All right. So visually, yeah, this is very much a light yellow. It's really about the same color as a Pilsner. It's not quite straw pale. It's got a little more depth of color, but it puts me in mind of a Pilsner. Looks very, very nice in terms of the color. As I don't know if you can tell in the camera or not, it is very, very active in terms of carbonation. You could probably guess that much just by how lush and quickly and huge this head formed on top. It's very, very active. Mix of really fine champagne-like bubbles and some slightly larger. I wouldn't say there's any medium in there. They're all mostly small, but very, very active. Very, very active in terms of carbonation. Yeah, this head, that is about as thick and lush as it gets poured at home, but it looks fantastic. Let's get down and give it a sniff. Ooh, yeah. Yeah, it smells very nice. It smells very, very fruity. The dominant fruit aromas I'm getting are kind of citrus, orange, and lemon kind of zest, really. Maybe a suggestion of lime, and there's also a notable pineapple aroma. Now, they did brew with Mosaic that often will impart some blueberry, but frankly, the citrus and the tropical side are so pungent on this that it's drowning out kind of that element that you often get with Mosaic. Yeah, it's mixed in there. I'm also picking up just a little suggestion of papaya. It smells really great. Smells very bright, very fresh, very fruity. So I'm expecting that despite the name, this beer is going to taste quite good. I'm just going to break down this head just a little bit. It's just a little over the top. That would make an absolute mess in my beer. And that'll probably help to let some of these aromas creep out of the glass a little bit as well. Yeah. Yeah, it's exactly. You can smell a little more clearly. It's not a ridiculously pungent aroma on this, but it smells very, very nice. You do have to get right up over the glass, but what you do get back on the nose is just fantastic. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Oh, that's a really nice IPA. That's a really nice IPA. Okay. So you do get a ton of fruit, accent, flavors, and all different types. And a lot of it does match what you got on the aroma. So there is a very clear citrus side to it. It, in flavor, reminds me more of a combination of ruby red, grapefruit rind or zest mixed with orange. I'm not getting as much lemon or any real suggestion of lime coming through in the flavor. In terms of the tropical fruit side, there is a little element of pineapple, which you could pick up on the aroma, but there's also some other tropical fruit in here. I smelled papaya on the nose. I don't really taste that in here. It tastes more mango-like, but it's very, very nice. Mixing with those different fruit kind of traits is this really nice earthiness to it, a nice earthy hop bite. And then there's a little bit of underlying funk. And, you know, high alpha acid content hops can do that. Citrus high alpha, Mosaic or high alpha, Columbus is pretty high alpha. But Mosaic are a hop variety. They're very popular. They're used in a lot of IPAs today. It's one of the hot new varieties that's been used a lot in the last couple years here because it has so many unique qualities. But one thing that it does do almost quicker than any hop I could think of is if you use a heavier hand with it, it can start imparting some really funky undertones to the beer. Now, a lot of people dislike that, but I just consider it one of the perks of this interesting trait. You don't get that with all hop varieties, but it's very nice. There's a pretty good punch of bitters on this one. I wouldn't call it astringently bitter. It's not like a West Coast style, you know, punch you in the teeth with its bitter profile. Although this does have very high alpha acid content hops in here, it's really much more just kind of the intricacies and qualities they bring to the table pungent with just a nice pack of bitters. This is not one that I think would freak out somebody new to IPAs that's just starting to appreciate what hops are about and the bitter sensation. But it's nice. It's nice. It's not tame, but it's not over the top. Just top that off just a little bit. I'm going to jump back in here for body and mouthfeel, think on this flavor development a bit more. Body on this one is medium to medium heavy. It's actually quite a bit more robust than I anticipated for 7.2. 7.2 is kind of high average range for a standard IPA. Nothing too wonky there, but the beer really does have a lot of breadth to it. In terms of mouthfeel, it feels pretty much like you would expect a standard IPA. There's a good bit of carbonation. It feels very clean. It's not dry, but it does get quite creamy. Quite a lot thicker if you agitate around the palate to let the flavors go. And in terms of the flavor development, yeah, it really is. It's really big, fresh, bright fruit up front, just all sorts of citrus with all sorts of tropical fruits. And then you get this undercurrent of earthy hop bitters and just a little twinge of funk. I got the same exact profile, basically in that same order on my first sip. On the second sip, it just comes in just a little stronger. There's still some lingering flavors here. In terms of the length of the finish on this one is very round and wet to the end. It feels very full to the end of the finish. It is longer than average, but it's not obscenely long. So you do get a good, nice push to the end, and really what's left is a lingering earthy bitterness just the slightest suggestion of that slight funkiness. And then there's this mix of citrus and pineapple. That's the residual flavors that are kind of floating in the back, but the earthy hop bitters is the dominant on the end of the finish. It's very, very nice. Honestly, this is a very, very good IPA. I expected it would be. I've had very good luck with all the beers I've tried by Barrier, collaboration or not. If they're putting their name behind it, from my experience, they're making a good product. So frankly, for my money, despite what I said about the name, if you make an IPA this good, you can call the beer whatever you want. I'll just leave it at that. The name has nothing to do with the beer. The beer is excellent. This is just a fine, well-done IPA. I'm going to take my time, sip on this, come up with my scores. When we come back, we will get to the second beer of today's IPA review. That is Ex Novo Brewing Company's Eliot Brewers Edition. That also clocks in at 7.2% ABV. Okay, now we're jumping into the second beer of today's IPA review. This one is Ex Novo Brewing Company's Eliot Brewers Edition. Just as with the first, 7.2% ABV. They're based in Portland, Oregon. And on this one, yet again, 3 different hop varieties. They both have Citra, so that's the shared element aside from ABV. But the other 2 in this one are El Dorado and Galaxy. So again, we're looking at a nice hop bill here that brings a bunch of different hop qualities to the table, but also fairly high alpha acid content. So don't really know exactly what to expect when we jump in, but I imagine it's going to be very hop forward. So first things first, in terms of label art, this is a super clean design. It's probably very difficult with that camera glare to see. It's just black with this kind of coppery and threading kind of running around. It's an interesting looking scene. I don't know exactly what I think it looks like other than perhaps maybe a map of a city. It almost looks like a waterfront with roads crisscrossing around. Very neat design. I like it. Nonetheless, we're going to get this one cracked gently. All right. And pour it right into the Sam glass here. All right. Yeah, visually already another nice looking IPA. And I'm going to give this a little bit of agitation here. Yeah, it did pretty good on the head there. Backed off, gave it room. All right. So visually, yeah, this has a slight orangey hue to the yellow. It's still dominant yellow, but it's a deeper yellow than on the prior beer. It's got a slight orangish, copperish hue to it. But I would say overwhelmingly, this is more or less a yellow beer. It looks very much like a classic IPA. Not super pale, just a nice deep yellow to it with slight orange hints. In terms of carbonation, you can probably readily tell. This one's pretty active, but it's not going quite as crazy as the first one did. A little bit of mix of medium size and smaller, finer champagne-like bubbles in there. Formed a pretty nice head there. It looks pretty creamy. I expect this one might stick around a little bit longer just because the carbonation isn't going quite as intense and crazy, but we shall soon see. Let's give it a sniff. Actually, I can really start smelling hops from about 1.5 feet away if I get right over it. Yeah, it smells great. Okay, so there's a nice mix of aromas coming through here. It's dominant smelling kind of like berries and tropical fruit with a little bit of an earthy undertone. There's just the slight hint of citrus, but overall I would say it's far more dominant with aromas of berries and tropical fruit. It's reminding me most notably of strawberry and pineapple. That's the big one. Citrus in here really kind of smells like a combination of grapefruit and oranges. You can smell it, but there's definitely a much more clearly pronounced berry and tropical fruit aroma to it. It smells great and that underlying earthiness. So without further ado, that head is settled. Let's jump right in. Oh, oh yeah, that's very nice. That's very nice indeed. Very good, clean, crisp taste up front. You get this slight burst of brightness, juiciness, and then it's immediate, full-on, earthy hop flavors coming to the table. And there's even a little twinge of pine resin-like quality under there. Now it does have Galaxy hops in there. It does have Citra hops in there. It does have Eldorado hops. Galaxy is probably going to be the primary culprit for that slightly resinous tar and pine-like quality. It is a bigger kind of West Coast style hop for my money. Citra is a big high alpha acid hop, but it brings a lot of different qualities to the table. Eldorado is just throwing all these other interesting elements into the mix. So a really nice hop bill that ends up bringing a lot of different hop elements to the table. There is a noticeable citrus accent from that Citra, and indeed, as is typical with Citra hops, it imparts not just aroma, but it does impart a distinct kind of citrus oil or rind quality to it. So it's got a much more astringently bitterness to it, the quality. Like you bite into the fresh of a fruit, it's going to taste sweet. But that rind, where all the juice, where all the oils are rather, that's where that really citric quality to citrus fruit comes from. And that certainly is the very, very bitter section. If you're just zesting a rind like you would do over a dish you're preparing, you'll tend to get a lot of the big burst of flavor and aroma without as much bitters. Once you start getting into that rind and not just the very outer flesh, that's where it really starts to increase the intensity of that bittering. It's very nice. Tastes very, very good. I really like the blend of hops in this beer. I'm going to jump in for body and mouthfeel, think of this flavor development a bit more. The body on this, I would say, is a solid medium to medium heavy. It's kind of right on that border. It feels a lot bigger than you would expect for this ABV range. 7.2, that's kind of middle of the road for an IPA, maybe high middle, but the body is much more robust than you would anticipate. Mouthfeel, very classic IPA mouthfeel. There's nothing funky about it, but it does have a decent bit of resistance to it. Notably, this one, if you agitate it around the palate, it does get very, very creamy. I wouldn't call it silky, but it definitely gets a lot thicker and creamier. Feels quite nice. Flavors really do a good job of lingering all around the palate. And on this one, what's really doing that is just the hop bitters. It's not ridiculously intense in terms of bitter intensity, but the level at which they appear really stays for quite a long time. So the finish on this one is really riding out longer than average. It's not the longest that you'll have on an IPA to be certain, but it's certainly longer than average. And what's really lingering is the sense of citrus oil bitters. I'm getting that strongly, as well as earthiness. And on the back end of the finish, there's only a slight hint of that resinous pine-like quality. It's much more dominated by earthy and citrus type bittering. It's very, very nice. In terms of how the flavor develops, it really hits you all up front, and it kind of mimics what I got on the nose. So there's this burst of bright freshness and ripe fruit, and it is kind of a mix of citrus and berry and tropical notes, and it really does more or less match what you got on the nose, what translates into the flavor. But far more dominant on this one, for sure, is the bitters. I'd say when you first get it in your mouth, when you first swallow, it's about 50-50, these bright fruit and then the bitters, but then the fruit within about 2 seconds at most completely nosedives out of the way, just lets those bitters continue to rise, and then they hold out for that nice long finish. Very nice. I really like the balance. In terms of the malt bill and how that struck between the hops, this is very much kind of a classic IPA formula, especially if you're thinking much more geared towards West Coast. Sure, they chose a nice malt bill, and it tastes nice, and it's got a nice breadth to it, nice body, nice mouthfeel. That did its job, but this is an IPA where very much the hops are the story of this beer. It's very centric on the hop varieties they chose, and it really does let a nice bit of that hop bittering come through in the beer. So if you're a hophead, I think this is one to consider. Is it an over-the-top West Coast style? No, it's not. But this one's very nice. Obviously, Portland, Oregon, they are West Coast, but this is nice. It's got a lot more pungent, bitter presence than many, many IPAs you could find today. Overall, I really like this one. I'm going to take my time. I'm going to sip on this, come up with my scores. When we come back, we will get both beers ranked from top to bottom. Okay, now that we've gotten to enjoy both of these IPAs, we're going to get them ranked. Starting with Barrier Brewing's collaboration they brewed with City Brewing. This beer is called That Ish Cray. 7.2% ABV on this one. They are based in Oceanside, New York. This was brewed with a blend of Citra, Columbus, and Mosaic hops. Starting with the aroma. The aroma on this beer was fine. It smelled very nice. You could smell a lot of different independent kind of aromas that came through. Fruit, citrusy, berry, tropical undertones, and some other hop characteristics, earthy, funky, etc. But in terms of pungency, it wasn't overly pungent. You really had to get over this one and give it a good sniff. But once you got the aroma, it smelled very nice and multifaceted. Overall, though, just average. It gets a 5 out of 10. For the taste, I really enjoyed the taste on this one. Frankly, the flavors that this beer produced were very, very nice, and they all worked very well together. Very well put together hop bill. Same thing with the aromas. The dry hopping that they obviously did pay dividends. Just in terms of what I crave in an IPA personally, and this wasn't bad. It was certainly above average, but especially with the hop bill that they put in there, those high alphas, I would have liked a little more bitter presence to come through. Above average though, it gets a 7 out of 10. For the body on this beer was positively huge. This was bigger than a lot of doubles and triples that I've had. And sure, maybe a more robust body than for a standard IPA range, but honestly, in this beer, I didn't think it was a bad thing. I give it a top marks. It gets a 10 out of 10. For the mouthfeel. Mouthfeel on this one was very much a classic IPA, though it did have quite a bit of resistance as well. Again, slight deviation, but it did pair quite nicely with the body. It wasn't flat. It was more or less what I expected for the ABV range. Gets a 9 out of 10. For the finish. Finish on this beer was pretty good. I was craving more bitters in the flavor profile, but honestly, the bitters that did come through really did a very good job of extending that finish out on each sip. It was nice and round and wet to the end. It didn't feel short. It didn't feel dry. No crispness, just a nice classic IPA finish. It was above average in length. It gets a 7 out of 10. For the head and retention, this one did an absolutely tremendous job. Formed a very nice, supple, creamy, foamy head that just stuck around the whole time. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the appearance, this is exactly what I picture in my head when I think of an IPA. It gets a 10 out of 10. For the balance on this beer was quite nice. Overall, I enjoyed it. I liked the hop blend that they used. I liked the balance of the hops. I also liked the malt bill, but for me, where the balance lost points is the same place the taste did. It needed a slight deviation on the balance of the big hop flavors they bring to the table and the hop bitters. You have all these high alpha acid hops. You can just extract a few more in the boil. That's all it takes, but it was nice. It was above average. It gets a 7 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible. Overall, I very much enjoyed this beer. I thought it was very, very well done. A very nice IPA. Barrier always does a good job with their beers. This was no exception. Above average, it gets an 8 out of 10. Finally, as an example of the style, I thought this was a very good IPA overall. Just a couple little nitpicks. Frankly, a little more intensity of that aroma and just some of the balancing act of the bitters, and that also would have helped extend the finish. On average, it does. You can't make a guarantee, but it typically does. Would have boosted a few other scores in a few categories and bring it up, but overall, well above average IPA. I really enjoyed it. 8 out of 10 is an example of the style, which brings the total score on Barrier Brewing Company's That Ish Cray, collaborative brewed with City Brewing, to an 81 out of 100. So overall, well above average beer. It was very, very good. I enjoyed it. I still stand by. It's a very colossally stupid name. I would never pick that. In fact, I hate hearing me say the words, but very good beer, so who cares? If you like IPAs, this is definitely one worth checking out. Moving on to beer number 2. This is Ex Novo Brewing Company's Eliot Brewer's Edition. Also 7.2% ABV, brewed with a blend of Citra, Eldorado, and Galaxy hops, and they are based in Portland, Oregon. Starting with the aroma. The aroma on this beer was fantastic. Again, just as with the first beer, you could smell all those independent hop characteristics, but the pungency on this one was really huge. It gets a 10 out of 10. For the taste on this beer was also quite nice. Very multi-layered, very multifaceted, a lot of different flavor profiles at play. It all came through equally, but this had the added bonus of being quite a bit more bitter than the first one. And I'm not making a direct comparison here, but overall, I enjoyed the flavor of this one better. I think it was more representative of what an IPA is. It gets a 9 out of 10. For the body on this beer was also huge. This was also quite a bit bigger than I anticipated for the base style and ABV range, but I didn't think that it detracted from the beer. I gave it top marks here. It gets a 10 out of 10. Mouthfeel on this one. Mouthfeel on this was quintessentially exactly what I expected for the ABV range on an IPA. Where it really got additional kind of bonus points for me was just how nice and creamy it got when you agitate it around the palate. It really added some extra volume, paired very nicely with that big, bold body. I gave it a 10 out of 10. For the finish on this beer was nice, though admittedly it wasn't as long as I anticipated. It was above average, but this had a lot more hop presence, a lot more bitter bite and bitter intensity. I expected it to extend quite a bit longer than it did. Still above average though, 7 out of 10. For the head and retention, this beer did a very good job. This was well above average, though it wasn't top of the heap. It does get an 8 out of 10. For the appearance, yet again, another one, pretty much exactly what I picture in my head when I think of an IPA. Gets a 10 out of 10. For the balance on this beer was great. The balance of the different hop varieties that they used, they all came through independently. You could taste all of the different qualities they brought to the table, and there was quite a bit more bittering in this one. I still craved more for an IPA using these big, high alpha acid hops, but overall, it did a great job. Give it a 9 out of 10. Feeling of the intangible? I thought it was a fantastic beer. I really did love this one as well. Frankly, the extra bitters really subjectively helped push it higher for me. I give it a 9 out of 10 here as well. Moving on to an example of the style. This is just a really well done IPA. It did lose some points in a few categories, but overall, big picture, very, very well done. I only docked 1 point here. It gets a 9, which brings the total score on Ex Novo Brewing's Eliot Brewers Edition to a 91 out of 100. So another well above average beer here. We got an 81 and a 91, 10-point spread. Both of these well above average, and they cater to a similar crowd, though this one is maybe for somebody that wants a little more bitter IPA. It wasn't over the top, but it was noticeably more bitter than the first. But either way, not a bad choice in the bunch. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live to YouTube, you can just click the notification bell icon. It's right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.